Well, welcome to another episode of Rimshots, which is brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I have a very special guest here, by the way of my friend Christina, who up there in Connecticut. We have the one, the only Mr. Tito Puente Jr., and I can actually say it properly. Um, Sir, how are you?
Nice to see you, Sean. Thanks for having me on the show. And big shouts out to Christina. She's a fantastic lady, always looking out for musicians. And I'm glad we got this opportunity.
So the first question I sent you a text. I don't know if you saw it, but I wanted to find it because I'm a drummer. I'm a rock drummer. Um, Did you start out on kit? What did you start out on? You're a percussionist, and so anybody that doesn't know Tito Puente is obviously your dad.
Yeah.
They would, but you're around that talent. It's going to rub off on you. There's genetics. There's all kinds of stuff. Did you start out on kit?
I started out on trap kit, and lo and behold, I happen to be a rock drummer myself. I love heavy metal. I'm a heavy metal fan, rock drummer fan, Iron Maiden, Slayer, Metallica. I've got to get big shouts out to Rush, our Canadian buddies, the great Neil Peart, the great Phil Collins. These are my drummers. These are my influences. My father, Tito Puente, was a king of Latin music and mambo music, a very antiquated percussion player and vibraphone player. He played 13 different instruments, but I particularly love the rock music of the 80s. That was where my generation was from. And I did start on the trap kit. And to be honest with you, my father never taught me how to play drums. A lot of people think, oh, you're the son of a legendary drummer. You would have been taught by him. But no, he told me to learn from teachings. So I had to go to school and learn how to read and write music. And I learned from a gentleman named Sam Ulano, fantastic jazz drummer, no longer with us. But I went down to the New York City and got the rudiments, the paradiddles and 7-stroke rolls, and I mastered all those, and I love playing the trap kit. That's where I started, on the trap kit. Double bass kit, go figure.
Ah, if you're a rock guy, and you don't do double bass. I can't talk to you anymore, man.
Well,
But
let's be
in all
let's,
seriousness, go ahead.
let,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, let's be honest with each other. Let's be honest with each other. We're both drummers. We're both frustrated bass players, and bass players are frustrated drummers. We know this.
Well, and it's like because I'm always picking on bass players for one reason or another. So let's see where it goes. So you mentioned, so you're basically you're an NYC kid, right? Like you born and brought up
Yes,
in New York City. Is that
yes.
accurate?
New York City area. I was born in Spanish Harlem.
So when
Yeah.
you were and obviously I have I'm New York City.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of New York and all things New York. What was that scene like growing up there for you? Obviously, you had a little bit more influence with your father being who he was and whatnot, but what was that scene like for you?
Sean, it was really incredible because there was a multitude of different genres of music that were on the radio at the time. My father, of course, being in the Latin music world, learning that Afro-Cuban music and that style of playing and the 3-2-2-3 clave rhythms. I was very intrigued by that. And yet at the same time, we have on the radio, we got the Def Leppards and the Bon Jovis and everything from 81 all the way through 1990 was such an eclectic mix of Madonna, Michael Jackson, Genesis. There were so many different styles of music coming out of the radios at that time, and we had our cassettes and vinyl, and to me, I was so enthralled by all that, and I think I gravitated more towards the rock stuff at that point. I like the '80s rock music. I love, of course, everybody's a fan of Zeppelin, the Mop Tops, the Beatles, but I was more into the bands that were coming out of New York at that time, the heavier bands, the Anthrax, the Overkill, these are really heavy bands that were coming out in the 80s at that time. And I was really enthralled by that, to see the thrash metal and the heavy stuff. And my father was not on of it at all. And he was like, what are you listening to? You should be playing, the music that I do. And I was always very anti Latin music. Being Puerto Rican descent, born and raised in New York, I had just different genres of music that I was influenced by, and I gravitated towards the pop music world and rock music world. But it was great, and I still cherish those times, and those bands are still with us even today, like the Iron Maidens and the Metallicas, and I still appreciate those. And I'll go buy tickets, and I'll be there in the front row, banging my head.
Well, I know as I asked you that question, I was going to ask you, what would senior have said, and you gave us a pretty good direction. as somebody that growing up, and obviously, he had a huge influence on you, and you shaded over into what he was doing, and it's great to hear that you're still, on all kinds of different things. I guess where was his guidance for you in terms of your upbringing and influence and that thing in the music world?
Yeah, I was kind of torn between uh, loving what I liked, and of course, my father being the heavy duty international star, the percussion player that everybody really looked up to. And, I would get fans of my father that would say, well, okay, kid, you should be playing like your father's stuff. And then I would have my friends who would be like, man, I love rock music. Let's go to a concert. And what does your father play? They didn't really know who he was. I guess it was more the American side of the Anglo side of my friends that didn't understand mambo music. What I do appreciate though is my mother. My mother, Margie Puente, is 82 years young, still with us. She decided, since my father, Tito Puente, did about 300 shows a year, Sean. It's a lot of music, a lot
Wow.
of performing, a lot of touring. At that time, in the 1970s and 80s, live music was really where it was at, especially now too. It's where it's at. It's with the moneymaker. But at that time, it was about selling records and being on tour and promoting that album. So my father would put out 2 albums a year for about 3 decades. So every time he put
Wow.
out a record, it would continuously tour. So he wasn't home that much. And I want to thank my mom, because when I was at the age of like 10, 11 years old, she's like, well, why don't you go and hang out with your father during the summer when I was in school? And my dad thought it was a bad idea because he was off frolicking the world with his mambo music. And then my
Right.
mom's like, no, go with him. And that's when I started learning about Afro-Cuban music, 2-3-3-2 clave, and learning about the timbales and the conga and the bongo, and learning those Afro-Cuban instruments. And I liked it, but I wasn't really too enamored by those sounds. It was my father. I guess you kind of look at your parents like, yeah, well, that's what he does for a living. And I miss my friends back at home, and I can't wait to get to the Bon Jovi or the Monsters of Rock concert with Van Halen, or I didn't really
Yeah.
think about it at the time, but I appreciate my mother now more so that she pushed me to go be with him during the summertime, and that's how I really honed in on my Afro-Cuban skills as a percussion player today. But my father didn't care for it until there was a song, of course, you of course well know, by Carlos Santana. It was called Oye Como Va. My father wrote the song back in 1963. It was remade in a rock version by Carlos Santana. And at that point, this was like early 70s. I was very, very young. I was about maybe 5 or 6 years old. And that's when my father said, well, he didn't really care for rock music at that time. And then as I got older, I started listening to more heavier stuff. He's like, well, why do you like rock music so much? And I go, well, you should like rock music too. And he goes, he actually didn't care for it until he got a royalty check. And then he said, I like rock music. I like Carlos Santana. I like this heavy stuff. And that's when he really got into broadening his spectrum of music. He was always into Latin jazz, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, some of those greats, Cab Calloway, the jazz world. Then he got into, of course, the hip hop and the dance music. And then, of course, he started gravitating towards the rock stuff, where he was getting more into tune with what Carlos Santana was, displaying around the world, mixing the rock and Latin music.
Um, your story makes me laugh because there's a great story. We were talking Bon Jovi where David Bryan, the keyboard player from Bon Jovi's with his father. And you remember when I was growing up and he said, stop playing that crazy rock music? And his father's like, yeah, yeah. How do you like that new Cadillac I bought you? It kind of just totally loves music after I. So it just reminded me that that's awesome.
Yeah.
A question I've always wanted to ask a true percussionist, because growing up as you would have, especially with the rock guys, you'll see the credits drums and percussion. And oftentimes percussion could be as much as grabbing a set of forks and knives and hitting them on it. It's not true percussion, right? What you do is true percussion, the timbales, the other things. If if somebody wanted to get into percussion, what would the first thing you would tell them if they want to be a true percussionist? Learn trap kit first, and or what would you tell them?
Yeah, Tito Puente was a trap kit drummer, and he was very influenced by the late Gene Krupa and those great drummers of those yesteryears. He really wanted to be the next Buddy Rich. So,
Mhm.
and when my father got into a bicycle accident, he was a mambo dancer too, and he couldn't really play anymore. And he really honed in to his Afro-Cuban side of what he loved to play. But he did start on trap kit after he came out of the war, which was in 1943. He served in the U.S. Navy at that time. And then when he came out, he went to Juilliard School of Music and got more into the Afro-Cuban sound. And that's when he started recording with Mario Bausa, Machito Orchestra. These are some legendary Afro-Cuban guys that were coming from Cuba to the States at that time. And of course, this was before the revolution. So Cuba and the Americas were really mixing sounds at that time with mambo, Latin jazz. It was really coming together with the likes of Dizzy Gillespie, and the Basie and Duke Ellington. They were very much influenced. But I would tell a young person today what my father taught me: surround yourself with creative people, thus you'll be creative. And that includes percussion playing. I could probably sit with you all night long and talk about drums and who we know and what your influences are. And that's the camaraderie of being a percussion player. When I go to drum clinics or drum shows, I just came from one in Nashville. I'm going to go to another one in November, that big one they have in, I think, in Boston or something. So I go to these drum shows and I spend hours and hours just getting information from different drummers and different techniques, styles of drumming. And I think just as musicians, I won't even say just percussion players, musicians themselves, we bounce ideas off each other. You are influenced to me, I'm an influence to you. If I watch you play live in concert with your band, I'm going to take some of those licks that you did. Man, that was a cool thing that he did with his sticks, and my father does. And we all bounce ideas off each other. So I believe that when you surround yourself with creative people, you become creative and bounce ideas off each other. Some people want to call it, stealing ideas, but I look at it more as like that person influenced your style of playing, just like the next drummer would too. We all get derivatives of the great Neil Peart, the Phil Collins style of drumming, the Buddy Rich, and of course the Gene Krupa style of playing with the one hand stroke rolls. And I mean, we all try to do that. We can say that with guitar players too. Like everybody wants to do the Eddie Van Halen thing, and we all want to sound like Michael Schenker, and just the greats. Alex Lifeson, he has a certain style of playing too. I think that's really what I would teach or tell a young person. Surround yourself with others that play the same instrument and bounce ideas off each other and start a band together.
And there's only so many looks to go around. That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not too many new things that you're hearing. And I mean, even you see some of these. I did an interview with a guy a while back, and he was talking about, there's drummers, but they're more digital creators, so they're not really playing with people. They're making these amazing videos, but they're not playing with people. But they're kind of versions of Buddy Rich and some like old things from yesteryear. So I like what you're saying there. I agree. There's only so many looks to go around. You mentioned your father played 13 different instruments. You're a multi-instrumentalist yourself, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So the question I have, because I mean, some people go, for God's sake, I have a hard enough time figuring out my own one instrument. Is it a natural ability for you? Do you spend time on each thing, or do you to the point where, if I pick up this one, it's going to be like, how do you balance all this out?
I kind of follow the leads of the mentors that I grew up with, especially the musicians that played in my father's orchestra. They were the ones that I would see them every single day traveling with my father. As I got older, I went on tour with him when I got out of high school, and traveled with him around the planet. And I noticed that they had certain techniques and styles of playing, but the influence of Afro-Cuban music compared to the I'll put it this way in more of the drummer's terminology. I think 2/4, like 2/4 time or 4/4 time. And then when I'm playing 3/4 or 2/3 clave, 3/2 clave. So I'm kind of mixing the both, but I do speak and think 4/4, 2/4 time. And you'll hear that in my percussion playing. And I think that's what kind of gives me my own developed style of playing. It's like he sounds like he could be a rock drummer, but he's playing that cowbell like he's a mambo player. So it's kind of like a mixture of that. I get that influence too from a very good friend of mine, Miss Sheila E., who happens to play the timbales amazingly. And she does the same thing. She thinks she's a trap kit drummer first, and then she went to conga and timbales, and she's well known for that. But playing 13 different instruments like my father did, it was kind of ironic to see how or just amazing to see him go from vibraphone to the marimba to a saxophone to a bass to a piano, which is a percussion instrument, and then to play 3-2-2-3 clave and then jump on a trap kit, which is a rare sighting. That I probably the only person that has a video of Tito Puente playing a trap kit. And we had that
Wow.
during a family get together. But that's something that you would see maybe in photos from when he was a younger a teenager, when he was sitting in with different orchestras and bands at that time. But to me, being diverse and learning your craft and learning different styles of music, that's really what gives your development skill much more broader scale, and that makes you actually more of a session drummer. So you can go into anything. I can go play with a Latin guy, and I can go play with a rock guy, and I'll still think like their style of music. It's better to learn more and have that broader spectrum of timing, and of course loose being on the trap kit, whether it be jazz drumming or rock drumming, and of course the Latin percussion.
And I love that answer. You mentioned Sheila East at the Halifax International Jazz Festival a couple of years ago. And I remember reading an article with her father. I don't know if it was a Modern Drummer, but it was one of them. And he was talking about her speed and precision on the trap kit. And I'm going like, she played the trap kit? I was like blown away. And then you
Yeah.
see her and it's just like, oh, yes, she can play the trap kit. She's incredible. From a feel perspective, what are you listening for? Because certain drummers listen for certain things. They'll listen to a bass player. I very much key off vocals when I play. I just kind of had that whole, I don't know what it is. It's that old Krupa sort of thing. And I'm not saying I'm a jazz drummer, but I kind of feed off the vocals. Is there something that you feed off when you're playing?
Yeah, I kind of feed off the crowd because remember the timbales
Nice.
that I'm playing and Tito Puente was brought to the front. Most drummers were in the back. And then,
Yeah.
Tito Puente was so electric when he was playing that the timbales come to the front. So I'm kind of feeding off the audience, but I have to have that conga player right next to me and that bongo player hitting that cowbell and the bongos. The rhythm section is, to me, in Latin music, my opinion, is very important. I can probably do a concert just with the piano, bass, conga, timba, and bongo, just us five. I add the horns in there to give it the whole mambo sound and the Latin jazz flair. But when people come to concerts or any of my father's shows or my shows, they're dancing to that conga drum and they're dancing to that cowbell and the timbale. That's what they did. The groove. They're dancing to that rhythm, the groove, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that when they listen to mambo music, or when anytime you listen to a Tito Puente record, it makes you move a little bit. It's that rhythmic sound, that Afro-Cuban sound that was really special back then, and it still sounds modern even till today. That the 2-3 clave and the 3-2 clave, cha 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 cha. It's very, very catchy. It catches people, and it's nice to see folks like Gloria Estefan who can mix it up into pop music, and Sheila as well. And that's nice to see that. But it all comes down to that rhythm section, which is the conga, the bongo, and the timbal. To me, that's the most important thing, and I base my playing off of what they're playing, as we are almost like a Voltron. You got to be a team. That guy has to keep timing for me to catch a solo, just like the conga player too. So that's where I really get my groove from.
Well, and I think it's important to, because some people you can tell they're playing and you're like, what are they listening to? Because it just kind of seems like they're not settling in, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you're right. I can't dance to you to save my life. I can't dance my life, but I hear that music and I definitely move, right? Um, so in terms of, you're a busy guy. Christina's sending me stuff. You're doing things all the time. What do you have going on for the rest of the year? I mean, it's hard to believe 2024 is almost done, but you're still hitting it.
Unbelievable. We were celebrating, of course, the 100th centennial of my late father, Tito Puente, who we would have been 100 years old this year. And we're doing this with a slew of concerts this entire summer. It's been a very, very busy year so far. And now we're coming into Hispanic Heritage Month, starts September 15th through October 15th here in the States, or I guess around the world for that matter. the music of Tito Puente always shines pretty brightly along with Celia Cruz during these next couple of months. And we have some big concerts coming up, a lot of them in New York, and we're going to Australia internationally. We're going to Australia at the end of October for a big concert, and Hawaii, and then we go to South America as well. A lot of overseas stuff happening next year in 2025 with the jazz festivals that they always have out there in Norway and Belgium and Germany and all the European provinces. And so I'm looking forward to all that. But if anybody wants to find out where I'm going to be next, you can just follow me on my social media. I'm a very social media guy. I go in there and I kind of plug everything. That's how Christina gets a lot of her information. And I encourage everybody to just follow me at Tito Puente Jr. and you can see all the great tour dates we got coming up. What's special about this particular tour that we've been doing for the past year, the Centennial Tour, is that we're showing footage of Tito Puente for a documentary series that we are putting out in 2025. Very exciting for the fans who love Afro-Cuban music and want to learn a little bit more about Tito Puente's upbringing, from humble beginnings in Spanish Harlem, New York, to becoming the international star, a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and of course 186 albums to his credit, probably a world record for any Latin recording artist ever. And there's so many accolades, and that story I really wanted to be told, especially long overdue, 24 years after his passing, hopefully a biopic eventually too. But that's what's special about this tour, is that you're going to see footage from that documentary series. I try to get that interactive feeling when I put the screen up and then I show my father and everybody's like, hey, you look like your father, you look like your dad. I just tell everybody I don't have the white hair yet.
Yeah. Well,
but it's come on out to one of the shows. I'd love to see everybody to come out and enjoy it.
well, and I tell you, you never have to have the white hair. Grecian's just for men, my friend. You know what I mean? I have one geek question that I have to ask you, because as you were talking about everywhere that you're traveling, and I don't want this to overshadow your last answer, because I think it's important that everybody knows that this is an anniversary tour. But the amount of touring that you do and you're all over the world playing, I'm assuming that you have to use backline, well, we call it backline, but gear that's not your own, that has to be rented or whatever. And for what you do, I would think that it would be sound-wise very precise for what you need to hear. How does that affect your playing? Do you spend time with the equipment? Like, how do you make? Because as you were, I use a drum kit that's foreign to me and it sounds weird, and I get all freaked out sometimes. So I'd love to hear your answer.
Well, I could tell you, Sean, that I have a warehouse full of Tito Puente timbales, the Tito Puente LP brand timbales, custom-made timbales, Tito Puente stuff. We also have a lot of these timbales in museums. So I have maybe about 50 pairs of these things. They're not allowed in my house. My wife doesn't allow drums in the house. Yeah, no noise here. So everything stays in a warehouse. We have it in a storage facility. So yes, I do ask for backline. I try to travel with my father's drums. It gives it a little magic to the concert, and people like to see memorabilia, and wow, his son's playing the actual drums that he played. So I try my best to give those drums the display, whether I'm doing a television show or something bigger platform concert, stadium or arena or festival or something like that. I try to bring those drums. I travel with them. Most of the time, though, I request for backline, specifically the LP Tito Puente 14, 15-inch timbales, along with the LP Tito Puente brand model timbalitos 8 and 10-inch, along with my favorite cymbal, which is the Azuka cymbal from Maziljan and Dorsey. And of course, my father was one of the pioneers that made that timbale sound. So we've been working with the LP company for over 60 years. They're celebrating their 60th anniversary this year. And we're very proud pioneers, and we as the Puente family, and with my mother and my sister and my brother, we support the company in any which way, and they give us drums. We just celebrated the centennial of Tito Puente, so they put out a limited edition centennial timbale set. I got the prototype. I kind of don't use that too much. I kind of like save it. But eventually a lot of this stuff goes into museums and into really cool spots like the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. There's another one in Arizona the Musical Instrument Museum out there. And of course, we try to donate some of the timbales that we do have that my father maybe played once or twice to different universities or conservatories of music where kids can actually play these things and feel honored to play something legendary like that. We also have vibes too. We gave to Berklee College of Music in Boston a set of vibes, marimba, a marimba set too. So there's so much. My father had way too many instruments that my mother didn't really care for, but she wanted to leave them to me, and I had to get a big old warehouse and put them all in there. But I specifically requested Tito Puente exclusively brand LP timbales when I do the back line, and they come out great. And of course, I asked for LP congas, Giovanni Hidalgo model. They sound fantastic. The John Dandy Rodriguez bongos as well. It's fantastic to have that brand still with me, and I keep it on my sleeve. There it is.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
I had a snare drum the other night that I couldn't get it tuned the right way, and I was using in-ears and it was just driving me nuts. But thank you so much for that answer. Look, I want to thank you for doing this, Tito Puente Jr., sir. I mean, it's very nice to meet you. I'd love to keep in touch with you. And just follow what you're doing, my friend.
Sean, it's such a pleasure talking to you. I love the camaraderie that we have, and all the drummers that are watching. Please check out the great videos on my father, Tito Puente, an amazing percussion player, sorely missed, and they called him the king of the timbales, El Rey de los Timbales, and you can see why when you see all the YouTube and the great videos that he left on this planet. Just an amazing, amazing concert, a performer, arranger, producer, and just a percussion player. Just hand down one of the best in the world. I put him right there with Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and of course, Gene Krupa. Tito Puente had really his own style, and I hope that everybody can kind of get and be influenced and be inspired. There's really the key word. I want my father to inspire people. My last name means Puente, means bridge in Spanish, and that's what I've been doing for 24 years since his passing, trying to bridge cultures, creeds, people, and of course the kids today to be influenced by Tito Puente. Follow me on social media at Tito Puente Jr., Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, all that stuff. And you can see all the tour dates and great footage of the documentary series. And I got one last thing. I wanted to check you out, and maybe I'll get this to you. You got to give me your address. I got some hot sauce, Tito Puente Jr. hot sauce.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I
I
love
don't know if
that,
you like
man.
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
will.
good
I
stuff.
will. Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
shoot
if
you
you
my
like
address
hot
for
sauce,
sure.
yeah, send me your address, man. I'll send you some, man. You'll like it. I got
I
4 different
will.
flavors, man.
Awesome. Tito Puente Jr., thank you so much for doing this, my friend.
I appreciate you. Thanks, Sean.
Peace.